The night air in Washington, D.C. carried the weight of anticipation. The auditorium inside the National Press Club had never felt so alive, rows upon rows of seats filled with journalists, policy analysts, and citizens eager to witness what the media had already dubbed the conversation of the decade. It wasn't a typical panel. It wasn't a routine debate. It was something no one thought they'd ever see: Governor Greg Abbott of Texas squaring off against former President Barack Obama. Cameras flashed like fireworks as the two men took their seats on stage. Abbott, composed as ever in his wheelchair, carried that quiet Texas resolve, the kind that needed no theatrics to command a room. Across from him, Obama leaned back with his trademark poise, confident and deliberate, the kind of presence that had once filled stadiums across America. The moderator barely got through his opening remarks before the tension became palpable. This wasn't going to be a polite exchange of ideas. This was going to be a showdown. Abbott's supporters in the audience waved small Texas flags, while Obama's admirers whispered eagerly, ready for their champion to deliver sharp blows. Then came the opening question: Governor Abbott, President Obama, what defines true leadership in a divided America? Abbott leaned into his microphone, his drawl steady, his eyes locked on the former president. Leadership isn't about making the crowd cheer, or about clever speeches polished for the cameras, he began, his tone firm but measured. Leadership is about standing your ground when it's unpopular, protecting your people when it's inconvenient, and doing what's right when the whole world tells you you're wrong. That's Texas leadership. The crowd erupted, half in applause, half in scoffs. Obama raised an eyebrow, a faint smirk tugging at his lips, as if to say, "We'll see about that." The showdown had begun. Obama didn't rush his reply. He rested an elbow on the arm of his chair, fingers steepled, voice low and measured, the cadence that once turned arenas into classrooms. "Governor, I respect conviction," he began, glancing briefly toward the moderator before locking eyes with Abbott. "But in a union of 50 states, leadership isn't just standing your ground. It's building the ground we stand on together. It's persuasion, not defiance. It's lifting up the many, not only the few who cheer your name." A wave of approval rippled through the left side of the room. Cameras zoomed. The moderator leaned forward. Abbott's expression didn't change. "With respect, Mr. President, Texans aren't asking me to persuade Washington to like them. They're asking me to keep them safe and working while Washington argues with itself." He shifted a fraction closer to the mic. "That's not defiance. That's duty." Obama tilted his head, the hint of a smile. "Duty without collaboration becomes isolation, Governor. When governors reject federal coordination, families pay the price. Floods, grids, pandemics, those don't stop at state lines." Abbott's response came smoothly, almost too calm for the sharpness beneath it. "And when coordination becomes delay, families pay a different price. I've looked sheriffs in the eye at 2 a.m. I've sat with ranchers who've patched fence lines more times than Congress has held hearings. They don't need a press conference. They need help." The room hummed, half applause, half murmurs. Obama leaned in now, voice tightening like a bowstring. "Help requires trust. Trust requires truth. When leaders escalate conflict for headlines, people start to doubt the whole project." Abbott nodded once. "Truth? Here's a truth. A border deputy in Maverick County told me he'd quit counting the hours and started counting the reasons he stayed, because the state showed up when the cameras left." He let the word settle, then added, softer, "That's not a headline. That's a home." For a long beat, no one moved. The moderator tried to pivot to policy specifics, but it was too late. The exchange had bled past talking points into something rawer: identity, obligation, the seam where state grit meets federal grace. Obama clasped his hands. "Then let's test it," he said. "Pick one problem. No slogans. How does your kind of leadership fix it?" Abbott didn't blink. "Start with the grid," he said. Start where lives hang on reliability, not rhetoric. The audience leaned forward as the moderator opened his notes, the stage lights sharpening like a spotlight on a fuse. Would the next answer ignite the room, or iron it flat? The moderator barely had to say the word grid before the room's atmosphere shifted. Everyone remembered the headlines, the freeze, the outages, the finger-pointing. It was more than policy, it was memory, bruised and raw. Obama leaned forward, seizing the chance. Governor, Texans died when the power failed. Pipes burst, families froze in their homes. The world asked, how does the wealthiest energy state in America leave its people in the dark? Leadership means admitting when systems fail and fixing them, not deflecting blame. Gasps rippled through the audience, but Abbott didn't flinch. His voice came low, deliberate. You're right, Mr. President. People died. And I've carried those names with me. But here's what Washington won't say: while committees argued, Texas went to work. We passed reforms. We winterized plants. We invested billions. We didn't hold a press conference, we rebuilt. Obama's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but calculation. Rebuilt? Governor, the reality is your grid still stands apart. No federal standards. No interstate safety net. That isn't independence, it's vulnerability. Abbott leaned closer, his tone tightening. No, Mr. President. That's sovereignty. Texas doesn't wait for permission to keep the lights on. And here's another truth. While Washington debates renewables versus fossil fuels, Texans power half the nation with both. We're the leader in wind. We're the backbone of oil and gas. We keep America running while Washington keeps talking. The crowd split, applause on one side, dissent on the other. The cameras drank it in, the tension spiraling. Obama raised a hand, commanding silence. His voice softened, but carried steel. Governor, independence without responsibility is pride. Pride won't heat a home when the storm hits again. Abbott let the silence stretch. Then, calmly, and promises won't, either. But steel, grit, and Texans who never quit? That will. The words landed like a hammer on oak. The moderator, sensing the heat, moved quickly. Let's talk national security, gentlemen. Immigration and border control, another point of division. The stage lights sharpened again. The crowd braced. The battle lines were only deepening. The moderator's voice trembled slightly as he read the next question, knowing it was dynamite. Governor Abbott, President Obama, immigration and border control remain some of the most divisive issues in America. How do your visions differ? The words hadn't even settled before Abbott leaned in, eyes unblinking. I don't need a briefing paper to answer that. I've stood on the Rio Grande at midnight. I've looked sheriffs in the eye when cartel gunfire echoed across the river. I've seen ranchers find footprints on their land that didn't belong there. This isn't an abstract debate for us in Texas, it's daily life. And when Washington delays, Texans pay. The crowd roared, chants of "Texas strong" echoing from one side. Obama held up his hand calmly, waiting for the noise to settle, then spoke in that steady cadence that had once electrified millions. Governor, I hear you. I've walked the border too. I've spoken with agents, with families torn apart by violence, with children who crossed with nothing but fear in their eyes. Leadership means securing the border, yes, but also remembering the humanity on the other side of it. Some applauded, others booed. The tension cracked like lightning across the room. Abbott's voice cut through the noise, calm but sharp. Humanity without security isn't compassion, Mr. President, it's chaos. Texans can't tuck their kids into bed at night with promises. They need protection. They need law enforced. Obama's jaw tightened. And security without compassion isn't justice, it's cruelty. America's strength has always been balancing both. The audience split again, half clapping, half jeering. Cameras zoomed tight on their faces, Abbott, steady as steel, Obama, eyes blazing with conviction. Then Abbott delivered the line that drew gasps, "Mr. President, in Texas we don't balance on promises. We build barriers, we back our sheriffs, and we secure our homes. That's the balance my people demand." The auditorium exploded, some cheering, others shouting. The moderator's gavel tapped in vain. The showdown was no longer political theater. It was personal, raw, and impossible to contain. The moderator's gavel finally restored a sliver of order, but the electricity in the air refused to fade. The audience leaned in, knowing they were no longer watching a polite exchange. This was a duel of visions, raw and unfiltered. Obama was first to reclaim the floor. His voice steadied into that familiar cadence, like a professor laying down hard truth. "Governor, America cannot survive on walls alone. We build bridges too. We rise when we remember that those who seek to enter are not just statistics or shadows, they are human beings. Dreamers who've studied in our schools, families who've risked everything for a chance at freedom. Leadership is courage, but also compassion." Applause thundered from one half of the room. Yet the other half folded their arms, unmoved. Abbott waited, calm, hands folded on the table in front of him, before leaning toward the mic. "Compassion, Mr. President, means nothing if mothers in Laredo can't let their children play outside. It means nothing if ranchers in Del Rio spend their nights repairing fences instead of resting. You call it walls. I call it protection. I call it giving families one more night of safety. That's leadership too." The words sliced through the applause like a blade. Shouts of "That's right" echoed from the back rows. The cameras panned across faces lit with intensity, some nodding in agreement, others scowling in defiance. Obama's expression hardened, just a flicker, before softening again into statesmanlike resolve. "Governor, leadership cannot be reduced to fear. If we close ourselves off, we lose what makes America America. Our strength has always been in our openness, in our ability to welcome, even when it's hard." Abbott's eyes narrowed slightly, a flash of steel. "And if we open without limits, we lose what makes Texas Texas. Our strength has always been in defending our ground, even when it's hard." The silence that followed was louder than applause. Two visions stood exposed, one of unity through embrace, the other of strength through defense. The crowd held its breath, knowing this wasn't just about Abbott or Obama. It was about the soul of the nation. The moderator's voice strained as he tried to move them to a new topic, but the electricity in the air refused to fade. What had begun as a policy discussion had become a symbolic clash, Texas grit versus national vision. Obama broke the silence first, his words deliberate, sharp, but calm. "Governor, you keep speaking of defense, of borders, of lines drawn in the dirt. But America isn't defined by fences. It's defined by the people who dare to cross them, who build something better once they arrive. That's our story." His supporters cheered, rising to their feet. The cameras caught faces lit with admiration. But Abbott's side waited, still, steady, their eyes on him. Abbott leaned toward the mic, his voice steady, resonant, but with an edge of challenge. "Mr. President, you speak of America's story. But here's another chapter. The rancher in Del Rio who wakes up to find his land overrun, the mother in Laredo who can't let her child walk home alone. Their story matters too. Leadership isn't poetry. Leadership is protection." The crowd exploded again, the split sharper than ever. Some booed, some clapped so hard their hands stung. Obama's jaw tightened as he leaned forward, his tone intensifying. "Protection without principle isn't leadership. It's fear. And fear cannot be the foundation of a nation as bold as ours." Abbott didn't flinch. His reply was swift, cutting through the noise. "And principle without protection isn't leadership. It's negligence. Texans don't elect leaders to make speeches. They elect leaders to stand guard. The audience gasped at the sharpness of his tone. Even the moderator seemed rattled, fumbling with his notes. The duel had shifted from controlled debate to open combat, a battle not of policy but of philosophy. Obama sat back, eyes narrowed, a faint smile tugging at the edge of his lips, as if relishing the fight. Abbott, calm and grounded, looked every bit the Texan determined not to yield. For the first time that evening, it felt less like an exchange of words, and more like a test of wills. The moderator tried to shift gears, but the duel between Abbott and Obama had already captured the audience like a storm rolling across the plains. The crowd was no longer politely listening, it was living the confrontation. Every word, every pause, every gesture drew either cheers or jeers. Obama leaned forward, his voice carrying the weight of history. "Governor, America has endured because we've chosen hope over fear. Because leaders before us refused to let division dictate destiny. From Lincoln to FDR to Reagan, this country grew by daring to believe we were bigger than our differences." His words echoed with presidential gravity, drawing loud applause and whistles from his side of the audience. Abbott sat unmoved, hands clasped, eyes locked on Obama. When the noise faded, his reply came like a blade, slow, deliberate, cutting. "Mr. President, those leaders you name. Lincoln, FDR, Reagan, they weren't remembered for speeches alone. They're remembered because they stood firm in the storm. Lincoln didn't compromise on the Union. FDR didn't compromise on victory. Reagan didn't compromise on freedom. And Texans won't compromise on protecting their families. That's not fear. That's survival." The crowd erupted again, this time louder, split down the middle like a fault line ready to crack. Supporters of both men shouted over each other. Some rose to their feet, pointing, chanting. The moderator's voice was drowned out entirely. Obama held his ground, his jaw set, his voice rising above the noise. "Governor, survival without vision is stagnation. We don't just survive in America, we lead. And leadership means sometimes doing the unpopular thing because it serves the greater good." Abbott's answer was immediate, sharp as a rifle shot. "And vision without survival is fantasy. Texans don't live in theories, Mr. President. We live in reality, one where storms, crises, and threats don't wait for Washington's grand speeches." The two men stared each other down as the audience roared, the clash no longer abstract. It had become elemental, hope against grit, vision against survival. And neither was backing down. The moderator finally raised his voice over the uproar. "Gentlemen, please. Let's keep this civil." But civility had long since left the stage. What lingered was a duel of identities, Obama the eloquent statesman, Abbott the immovable Texan. Obama's eyes fixed on Abbott, narrowing just enough to signal he was done circling. His words came with precision, each one sharpened. "Governor, you speak of reality. But let's talk reality. Texas has the highest rate of uninsured citizens in the country. The grid failures, the border chaos, these aren't just threats from outside. They are cracks from within. Leadership means fixing those cracks, not hiding behind slogans." The crowd gasped at the direct hit. For a moment, the room hung still. Abbott's jaw tightened, but not in anger, in resolve. When he finally leaned into the microphone, his voice carried the calm of someone who had been underestimated too many times. "Mr. President, you call them cracks. I call them scars. And Texans don't hide scars, we wear them as proof we've survived. You talk about uninsured citizens? I've met them. I've walked into clinics where doctors work overtime because they believe in service, not bureaucracy. Washington's solutions drown them in red tape. Texas solutions give them the freedom to choose." The audience erupted again, half applause, half sharp boos. Obama's supporters shouted, Abbott's base clapped until their palms stung. Obama leaned back, lips pursed, before replying. "Governor, freedom without access isn't freedom at all. What good is choice if you can't afford the doctor? What good is sovereignty if people freeze in their homes?" Abbott's eyes locked with his, steel against fire. His reply came like a gavel. "And what good are promises if the lights still go out and the border still burns? Texans don't want polished speeches. They want results. And results don't come from Washington lectures. They come from Texas grit." The roar that followed rattled the walls. Journalists scribbled furiously. Social media feeds lit up in real time. The personal strikes had landed, but neither man seemed shaken. The showdown was no longer about policy, it was about legacy. By now, the auditorium was no longer just an audience hall, it was a battlefield. Every sentence ricocheted like a bullet, every pause felt like the moment before thunder. Abbott and Obama had stripped away pleasantries. What remained was raw conviction, each man standing not just for policy but for identity. Obama leaned forward, his voice rising with urgency. "Governor, America cannot be 50 fiefdoms. It must be one nation, indivisible, united in its purpose. When states go rogue, when leaders put independence above unity, the whole country suffers. That's not strength, it's fracture." The applause from his supporters shook the room, chants of "unity. Unity," echoing like a rally cry. Abbott waited for the noise to die, his expression carved from stone. "Mr. President, unity without respect is control. And Texans will never be controlled. We don't ask Washington for permission to defend our land, our families, or our freedom. Call it rogue if you want. In Texas, we call it responsibility." The crowd erupted again, this time with chants of "Texas Strong." A line of veterans in the front row rose to their feet, saluting Abbott, their weathered hands trembling but firm. Obama, unflinching, raised his voice above the clamor. "Responsibility isn't ignoring your neighbors. It isn't pretending your actions don't ripple across 50 states. Leadership requires vision, not just for Texas, but for America." Abbott's reply came instantly, thunder in his tone. "And vision without ground to stand on is nothing but smoke. Texas provides that ground. Oil, gas, wind, grit, we fuel America while Washington lectures us about how to do it better. Without Texas, the lights go out. Without Texas, America stumbles." The auditorium roared, split to its core, the sound nearly shaking the rafters. Reporters scribbled headlines with trembling hands, knowing history was unfolding before them. The moderator raised his voice desperately. "Gentlemen, final question before closing statements. What is the single most important value America must hold on to in the years ahead?" The room hushed instantly. The moment had come for both men to stake their claim, not just in the debate, but in the nation's heart. The hall fell silent. Even the cameras seemed to pause, waiting for the answer to the moderator's final question: what is the single most important value America must hold on to in the years ahead? Obama spoke first, his tone softened but charged with conviction. "Hope," he said, the word echoing like a drumbeat. "Hope has always been the compass that guided America through its darkest hours. It was hope that carried us through the Depression, that marched with us across Selma's Bridge, that rebuilt us after September 11th. Without hope, we are just 50 states drifting apart. With hope, we are one people, unafraid of tomorrow." His supporters rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some chanting his name. The cadence was vintage Obama, lyrical, soaring, and resolute. Abbott waited until the noise ebbed. Then he leaned into the mic, his voice quiet at first, but carrying the weight of Texas thunder. "Strength," he said firmly. "Hope without strength is just a wish. And wishes don't defend borders. They don't keep the lights on in a storm. They don't hold a family together when everything else falls apart. Texans know this. America must remember this. Strength is what gives hope a spine. The crowd erupted, this time both sides shouting over each other, a storm of applause and protest. Reporters hammered at keyboards. Social media exploded. Obama stood, gesturing with his hand, trying to rise above the roar. Governor, strength without hope is tyranny. And tyranny is not America. Abbott looked directly at him, unwavering. And hope without strength is weakness. And weakness is not Texas. The two men locked eyes, the clash distilled into a single moment, not speeches, not applause, but the raw tension of two leaders embodying two visions of America. The moderator's voice cracked as he closed, "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. This concludes tonight's debate." The audience thundered one last time. Obama lifted his chin, regal, defiant. Abbott sat steady, immovable, the embodiment of Lone Star grit. History would remember this night not as a debate of policies, but as a duel of legacies. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just witnessed was not just a debate, it was a battle of visions. Barack Obama stood tall, calling for hope, for unity, for a nation that lifts its people through compassion and shared destiny. But Greg Abbott, with the grit of Texas in his voice, reminded America that strength is what turns hope into reality. Hope without strength is just a dream. Strength without hope is survival. This clash wasn't about policy details alone, it was about identity, legacy, and the very soul of America. Obama's eloquence versus Abbott's steel. And in that tension, we saw the essence of democracy, two leaders daring to define what this country must hold on to as it marches into the future. So what do you think? Was it hope that resonated with you, or strength that struck deeper? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this debate is bigger than the stage, it's about all of us. And remember, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story where politics meets passion, and where leaders are tested in the fire of confrontation.